First of all, I would like to thank the three previous speakers because they have already said something about the book, and I think that what they said was very interesting. As book editor, I now have the opportunity to tell you more about it. But in particular, I would like to start by saying that this book is the result of a very long work. Everything started from Le Strade del Mondo workshop organized by Villa Emma. And in particular, we started from some speeches, we transcribed them, and in particular, we decided to work on some keynote speeches delivered at that time, but then things kept changing, and we saw that things evolved over time, in particular, as soon as we were trying to pinpoint specific topics, new ones used to arise. So that is why that work required such a long time and turned into proper research work. After many changes and variations, we decided to divide this book into three fundamental sections. So, childhoods and wars in the 20th century. And then we decided to have a special section devoted to the beginning of the third millennium, so our times. And then we have a third and last part about memorial issues. And 7 chapters try to shed new light on the structure and topics, and these chapters are preceded and followed by 2 essays that make up a sort of frame. The first essay is by Marcello Flores on cartographies of the 20th centuries on the different forms of conflicts that stir up our times today. And then we decided to close with something different. It's a sort of interview with Antonella Levi, a conversation that we had with her, and we carried out this during several meetings that we have with this psychoanalyst who lives in Verona and who went through fleeing away from the war and trying to take refuge. And at that time, she was just a 4-year-old little girl. We have totally 24 authors who made a contribution to this book. And we think that there are some highlights. One of them was mentioned by Luigi just before. It's the education. This is about a relationship that Joseph Indig had with the Villa Emma boys and girls. Then secondly, we are going to talk about the past coming towards the present, and we tried to pinpoint topics that have to do with our contemporary times and migration times, specifically, as Mustafa El Ayoubi said. And finally, we decided to focus on the ways we try to adopt to deal with these issues, as Anam Brambilla said. I would like just to dwell a bit on the final essay, the one devoted to memorial topics, because specifically we tried to somehow give indications of some sorts. And the very first idea was to have a specific section devoted to Nonantala as a memorial place. And this essay is like a preview of some reflections, and this has been put on the website of Villa Emma. Then we have the Isio experience in France, where a group of children tried to be saved, but unfortunately it was not possible because at the end they were deported to Auschwitz. And then there are two articles on Sarajevo. One is related to the history of Sarajevo and its way to convey the memory of the past of the war. And there is an interview to Mr. Tokacha, who collected the names of some people. I mean, in particular, he tried to collect the names of those who lost their lives during the former Yugoslavia war. And Julia Levy carried out this interview. I don't know if she's still there with us. Oh, yes, welcome, Julia. And Julia is one of the young authors who made a contribution to the book. And there is something that makes us very proud because we tried, I don't know if we succeeded, but we tried to really involve many young experts and researchers who sometimes think not to have enough authoritativeness to put their names next to Marcello Flores or other experts, so they feel sometimes shy. But actually, I think that they prove to be extremely competent as high-flying experts and speakers, and so I would really like to thank them. And I really want to thank these young researchers who made these important contributions. And then, last but not least, I really want to tell you something about the different writing styles, because you will find a traditional essay, and you know that kind of template far too well, but you will also find interviews, and you will also find letters as a genre, because Edith Burke, for instance, and Elvira Muricic are authors, literary authors. We have a young coming from Bosnia, and well, another person who doesn't need presentations, a real narrator coming from Hungary, but now adopted from Italy, who shared her experience in extermination and death camps. So I'm referring to Edith Brooke. And then we have pages devoted and related to, I mean, drawings, and in particular manga drawings, which are used to tell a story. And there is a chapter devoted to the history of Gen of Hiroshima in the Nakazawa manga cartoons. So I'll stop there because the book is available, and so you can have a look at it, at its structure and its index. So I now give the floor to Maria. Thank you. I would like to tell you a couple of things about the birth of this book. And it is something I was talking beforehand with Maida, and we were talking about the memory of childhood. Well, many authors talk about memory. Some essays of a more historiographic nature, in particular those who have to do with Wilhelma, are quite historiography oriented. But still, many other chapters of the book are mixed, like the one from Mrs. Pontacava, who decided to think over pedagogy and difficult pathways of education. And she does that by starting from her own definition of the world while she was a Jewish little girl who was hiding in a specific convent managed by Catholic nuns. So this is a book about lost and refound traces, and this is something very interesting because those of you who maybe joined the Età del Transito del Conflitto workshop would remember that there was an Afghan young boy. At that time, he was 18 years old. He then we left Afghan and then worked for some years in Iran. And then when he was 12 years old, he left Iran on foot. He crossed many countries and many areas, and he was then at one point captured, and it was almost a lucky strike because the boys and girls decided to hide, and then they were sort of spotted, and they were brought to specific detention centers. And in particular, one of them was extremely talented and intelligent. And we have met him, and we were able to arrange a meeting, and then we became friends, and we invited him to this conference to share his story with the guests. And his speech was so remarkable that then during that very same event, that somehow changed the course of the conference, and other people who joined the conference then wrote a lot about him. And for instance, there is a very long interview that deals with Iran and Afghanistan, who met this boy several times. And then we have the chapter on education, and everybody there tried to take inspiration from their own experience. And so, again, now the book is over, but it is important to remember that this is not really the end. Well, and this guy from Afghanistan did not want to, be considered as special. I don't want those solidarity full gazes around me, because often, people feel obliged to show sympathy, and so we were asked not to publish what had to do with him and his story, and so that's what we did. But it was quite hard. It was quite sort of complex for us, but then we tried to negotiate. So his autobiographical short story that he had written for a school magazine would not be published, and then we took away his name and kept just the initials. So all spatial references to his current house have been kept. So we kept the essays. And so those of you who joined the conference I mentioned before will certainly know him. And our hope was that of encourage him to find a solution with this memory, trying to find some sort of reflection opportunity. And by the way, another important element of the book is the Anna Galicic journal. It was a Bosnian little girl who lived in Sarajevo at the beginning of the war. And just a few days before the start of the war, so in 1992, she had a journal on a sketchbook she got as birthday present. And these journals and these sketchbooks, like Shoshana's diaries, are extremely important. This is extremely important because this is a testimony from a city under siege, and then there was the try to go away. And when I interviewed her for the very first time some years ago, when I was doing some research work on young Bosnian refugees, she remembered suddenly that she had that diary, the journal, and she had left it to a family that had welcomed her parents and her. So I told her that she had to find it. So when she was invited to the conference, she accepted to go back to Val d'Aosta to look for her diary. Because, of course, in the meantime, she has done a great deal of work because she has added reflections also on her style, but then she lost it in the cellar of her current house. So Elvira Mojicic is an author, and well, her style is very peculiar because it's like she was able to tell her story directly. She started and tried, but then erased and started again from scratch. So this is quite interesting. And Eddie Brooke, by the way, talks about the same issue, in a written form. So the dialogue between Edith Brooke and Elvira Mojicic is mentioned just because of this reason. And Donatella Levi, who wrote a very nice book on her childhood, but as a hidden Jewish little girl. But then she had some sort of block. In particular, we tried to write each other's letters, and then these sort of little first experiences, we developed this three-voice dialogue because she says something interesting things about the body, the revolution, and this is narration, dialogue, storytelling, and this is very interesting. And this is again a recurring topic. So hiding one's own traces, and especially we know that when we talk about these topics, this is something Anna knows very well. That is the difficulty of telling, and also the willingness to collect the stories of these asylum seekers, younger and older. And this is not easy because there are specific things to be considered, but then if you have a look at the problems and difficulties that have to be faced by these people. I remember some years ago at another similar conference where we had foreigners sharing their experience with us. And they told us about problems in dealing with authorities, and also they have very peculiar stories. So, every person had their own realizing and understanding way, and there is this ambivalent relationship between the narrative truth, the legal truth, the subjective truth, and so another new pant I do not remember of. So what is most important is to find back these traces in order to remember, or better, try what happened. But then we should never forget the present times, and I do really care a lot about the chapter devoted to education, and this has to do a lot with welcoming young people and with education in general. And we know that inside welcoming facilities, there are educators, that's the way they're called. Educators are quite tricky figures, so they should educate to what? Their function is not clear and easy because, well, if you are an Italian professor, it's quite clear. Being a biology professor is quite clear. But then when it comes to, these topics, it's about people who should teach you, how to choose the right parameters and use them as benchmark. So over the last few days, I read an interview by Foucault to a magazine, and that was published in 1973, and he says that being executive people is something that has to do with adapting the individual to the development process through social orthopedics. Who is going to do that? The psychologist, the psychoanalyst, or who? The consultant? So the interview is entitled "The World is a sort of big infant school." So on the one hand, there is the will to welcome these people as if it was an infant without self-determination who cannot express themselves. So it is quite reasonable to support such individuals and help them, because sometimes these may lead to a sort of flattening process, and it is important to understand the possible reasons for these infantilism that sometimes it is found, because actually these young boys and girls should be more enhanced and sort of valued through specific training pathways that sometimes are not specific enough. So sometimes they just overlap partially with these strict training. Some time ago, I was collecting the story of a boy who had gone through several African countries, and he started his trip, his journey as an illiterate, but then he stayed in Nigeria for many months, and he met there a young sort of intellectual from Senegalia, and who also liked jazz music, and taught him to play the phone and the shampoo. And well, he really wants to share his sort of part, and he really wants to share because you want it. This is also about the goal of this book, trying to sort of share one's experience, to try to start again from scratch, a new life, a new pathway. Thank you. This is what we're trying to do specifically. Thank you very much for your attention.